I'm with Jeremy Smith, the director for Ebenezer Operation Exodus. Now, Jeremy, what is Ebenezer Operation Exodus?
So, Ebenezer Operation Exodus is a Christian ministry that's been going since 1991. It started in a prayer conference in Jerusalem. If you remember, it was Saddam Hussein and the Iraq War. And they were all praying. They were in their gas masks because of the Scud missiles. And in the middle of this, one of the leaders felt God had spoken to them and said, now is the time to help the Jews return from the former Soviet Union in those days. And so he spoke to one of the other leaders, and he thought that he would, the other leader would say, you're wrong. But actually he said, I agree with you. And so they started praying. The man was a man called Gustav Scheller he was Swiss from England. And he had a travel agency, and he just sensed strongly that God said now was the time to get the Jews out. And so he approached Mano Shipping, which was a big shipping company, and said, how much would it cost to hire a boat to help the Jews out from the former Soviet Union? The doors to Russia had opened, and many Jews were seeking to leave. And so he said it would be $1 million. And so he looked at the person with him, a man called Steve Lytle, and said, well, how much money do you have, Steve? And he looked in his pocket and he pulled out $1. But they were so convinced that it was right that they signed the contract on this boat, even not having the $1 million. And I think it was a week or 2 weeks they had the $1 million.
Wow.
And so they rented the boat, and really Ebenezer Operation Exodus has been helping Jewish people return to the land of Israel since that time. And now we've assisted over 200,000 Jews make Aliyah, that's the return to the Jewish land of Israel, since that time.
Today, do you put on boats and special aeroplanes, like in the beginning?
The boats ran for many years. We did over 100 sailings, but it became more practical to obviously help them fly. So for many years, we've assisted in flights. We've paid for chartered flights for the Jews coming out. That's been going on since then. It's interesting, though. I wonder, when you read your scripture, you read about the ships of Tarshish. And I wonder if we're moving to a time when the boats will come back. I don't know if it'll be big boats or small boats, but it looks like Europe and America and the West is becoming very dangerous for Jewish people. And so I can see there will be a time when we will look at various ways of helping them get back to Israel.
Now, we see a big rise in anti-Semitism, particularly in the West after October the 7th. Are you seeing a big demand for Jews to make Aliyah today?
Yeah, there are a lot of Jews that are in process. Obviously, we're just going through a war at the moment. The ports have been closed. But at one point, the Global Aliyah Center, that's the center for Jews who are interested in making Aliyah, they were having 500 calls a day. And so there was a big demand. Obviously, at the moment, they can't get here very easily. And it's a huge step. So people are in process. They're wondering how to do it, what to do. But yes, we are watching the continuation and growth of a number of people moving back to Israel.
Now in the UK, we've seen ambulances burned on the street. We've seen a terrorist attack in Manchester. Death to the IDF shouted at the music festival. What's the mood in the UK like? Are you feeling that do you have contact with people in the UK, and what are they saying?
And, I know some Jews living in London. I'm originally from London. And I contacted one just to find out what was happening. And he said, my community is petrified with the rise of Islam, and they are very scared. Some of them have come back. I'm expecting more. I think they will be pushed out. So yes, there's a rise of fear, especially, where I know in London, I know in Manchester. It's also rising. I think it's getting to very dangerous proportions.
If a Jew wants to come back here to the land, what do they have to do? What's the process?
Well, I encourage people now to approach the Global Aliyah Center. It's on the Jewish Agency website, and they've set up a call center where you can call them up and you can ask questions. What does it mean to make Aliyah? What proof do I need that I'm Jewish? And they will explain the process to you, and if needs be, they will open a file for you and help you they won't help you find the paperwork, but if you have the paperwork, they will be able to prove that you are Jewish and help you on that process. So that's my first port of call, really. That's the Global Aliyah Center, and you find it on the Aliyah page on the Jewish Agency website.
And what do you do to help Aliyah?
Well, Ebenezer Operation Exodus, like I said, it's been going 30 years. It's an international work. We have people in over 60 countries. And their role really is to assist Jewish people where they can in making Aliyah. Sometimes, in some countries they're able to research lost documents. In other countries they will help you pack your belongings. They will help you get to the airport if needs be. So that's the work overseas. In Israel, for the last 6 years we've had one house, because really, Scripture's very clear that God says, "I will plant you in the land." But what we find is a lot of Jews come back, but they've really not thought through what happens when they get here. So the role of Ebenezer Operation Exodus in Israel is to assist in that process. So now we have 2 houses where people can stay for normally 3 weeks, and in that process you find the next place to stay. We will encourage people. We will be a listening ear where people are having problems, because for a lot of people, Jerusalem especially is a lonely place to be. So we want to be there and assist where we can those coming. Next steps will be helping people find work, accommodation, and so we'll do what we can. We're limited. We're a small team. But we see the role of Christians, especially in assisting the Jews back. And I think it's straight out of Scripture. So I see this wonderful relationship between Jew and Christian working together for the purposes of God.
Do you have many Jews actually coming back here to the land but actually don't speak Hebrew?
Probably the majority.
Wow.
The Russian Jews coming back, they don't speak Hebrew. The Ukrainians don't speak Hebrew. Some of them will have had some learning. The Americans maybe, because they do, a Jewish school or Jewish kindergarten. So they do have some Hebrew. But the majority of us come back with very little language. And then, if you make Aliyah, if you go through the system, you get a free ulpan for 3 or 5 months. So there are people to help you. It is a challenge. But if you can learn the language, it's a big asset in this land.
And you obviously have to become legal, so you have to go through the Ministry of Interior. Can that be quite a difficult process as well, just actually getting all your paperwork sorted out?
Yeah, it depends who you are and where you're coming from. If you're connected with a Jewish community and you have a rabbi and you have your parents' marriage certificate or your marriage certificate or birth certificate, then it can be an easy process. But for a lot of people, it is a challenge. You've got to research a little bit to get your papers. But yes, you do the challenge. It takes a little while. There is a process. It is a challenging process, but one I recommend Jews do, especially at the moment. I recommend people, if you're concerned about where you're living, you find your papers, you make a file, you do what you can, and you start the process, and then you walk the process. And there are people here, Global Aliyah Center, they will help you do that. So I highly recommend that. But it is, prepare yourself. It's not the easiest of processes. Israel is not an easy land. I encourage everyone to come with their paperwork. Get that sorted out first, because, when you get here, there isn't the support or help to find those papers. It's much better to do it when you're in your home country and then come with those papers. A number of people here try to come otherwise, but they get stuck because they can't prove their Jewishness. Even if Israel knows they are, they can't prove it. And so you don't get the citizenship. So get it sorted out now, and then when you come, you'll be ready.
How long can it take to get citizenship?
That's how long is a piece of string. Yeah. For some people, it's very quick. It's not difficult. You can get a rabbi's letter. It comes quite quickly. A matter of months. For others, it can be 2 years, 4 years. It can take longer because there's just a more of a process to go through. I find, I made Aliyah in 2003, and it is a challenge, but a challenge that actually changes us. The big things to look at when you're outside of the land, what will I work as? And there is, again, with the Global Aliyah Center, they've developed an app where they will try to connect you. If you're a doctor, they will connect you with doctors, or if you're any other field, a physiotherapist, then they'll connect you, or a social worker, then they will seek to connect you with other people who are involved in that field. And I think that's a wonderful service. So you actually get to understand a little bit of the land before you come.
So you made Aliyah in 2003. Was it easy for you to do that process? Did you have all these organizations in your day?
Absolutely not. It's become in many ways easier and harder, But for me, I came when my wife was 8 months pregnant. We couldn't fly. We travelled across Europe to get here into Odessa and came down on one of the boats that Ebenezer had in those days. It was a real journey. It's a real proving time. So it was difficult, and it took me 2 years to get my citizenship. My name was changed in 1931. I wasn't alive then. But my grandfather changed our name in London to assimilate and hide. It went from Binovsky and became Smith. And so when I started this process, I had to prove that my name was changed. And that meant going to finding it was a cemetery in London at Stanmore, big Jewish cemetery, where my grandmother was buried. And when I found those documents, that's what really allowed me in. It took me longer to get my wife in. She's not Jewish, so that was a process. But again, it's part of the process.
Why did you want to leave to come to here?
But I sensed God telling me to come. My wife was driving in the car, and I was working in Christian ministry. She sensed God's voice, and God told her she was going to have her third child in Israel, and she was 7.5 months pregnant at this point. And she calls me at work and says, "Jeremy, you need to sit down." I said, "No, I'll be all right." She said, "Jeremy, you need to sit down." And I said, "I'll be all right." And then she told me about sensing God speaking to her to have her baby in Israel. So I sat down, and then I said, "Well, I can't go to Israel to have a baby because God spoke to you. He'll have to speak to me." And 2 nights later, in the middle of the night, he wakes me with a scripture. On the basis of that scripture, my heart was completely changed. I went back to sleep, woke up in the morning, my heart had left the ministry I was with for 11 years. My heart had left England, and I was going to Israel. And at that point, she was so far pregnant she couldn't fly. But in the end, what happened was we ended up traveling all the way across Europe to Odessa. We went to Brussels, to Germany, to Poland, to Odessa, and then took the boat back to Israel. So ours was a particularly difficult journey. But I look back and I see the tenderness of God in this process. And I do believe it's from Scripture that he's calling the Jews back to this land. I think he has a purpose in being here. And if you go through the Scriptures, he talks about a time that he will bring the Jews back. And I believe we're in that time. And I think part of the changes in Europe is to encourage the Jewish people to come back.
Yet the Bible talks about sending the fishers and then sending the hunters. It feels like we've already had the fishers going out. Is it now a time of sending the hunters where Jews will actually sort of come running back here to the land now?
Yeah, I think, if you read it, it's Jeremiah 16, and if you start at verse 14, it says, "No longer will you say those that came out of Egypt, but you will say those that came from the four corners of the earth." And what is God saying? He's saying that there's going to come a time when the million that came out of Egypt is going to pale to this next Aliyah return of the Jews. And so I believe we're in those days. He talks about, then he goes on to say, "I will send fishermen." And, for the last 50 years, 60 years, I've known many Christians go out even to Siberia, to the Jewish people, to the Ukraine, to the Jewish people, saying now is the time to return. And I remember one friend coming back 20 years ago now from the Ukraine, and he said, he as a Christian went to the Jewish people, and they laughed at him and said, "Well, why would we leave the Ukraine when it's so good?" Yeah. It was the breadbasket of Europe. Now, when we look at what happened, I'm sure many of them had wished they'd left when the message went out. So those were the fishermen, and I've known many Christians going. I do believe with all my heart now we are in the time of the hunters, and God will bring the Jewish people back. And so they're going to be, I think, driven back. So better to come now, better to be ready now than to wait until it gets really bad. One change that we see now, when in Hitler's day, they hid what they were doing to the Jews, but now what we're seeing in Islam, that there is no hiding. People are being attacked. Nobody seems to be too concerned about it. Nobody's trying to hide it. It's very open. And I think now that we're in these days, if I were Jewish, I would seriously be considering, coming back here. It is, you can be Jewish here with no problem. It's a safe land. It's crazy, isn't it? In the middle of war, I still feel that Israel is the safest place for the Jewish people to be. It's crazy to say that, but I believe with all my heart.
So God is using the evil of anti-Semitism and the evil of the persecution of the Jews, particularly in the West, to bring them back home to the land which they don't really want them to go to in the first place.
Yeah, and it's a crazy way to look at it, isn't it? I mean, we look at what's going on, we look at the evil, but when you take it back to Scripture and you read these scriptures that say, I will bring them back and I will have them, they will be pushed back. And absolutely, it all depends how you look at it, doesn't it? But I'm seeing the purposes of God. And, when you read through Ezekiel, two things. One is God says, I will bring them back because I love them, because of the love of the fathers. I will bring them back. But the second thing, it comes out, I think 10 verses in Ezekiel 36 and 37, he says, I will bring them back so that the nations will know that I am the Lord. And so as it gets harder, one of the signs that God is God, that he is the Lord, is the return of the Jewish people. And it's a sign to the Christians. So it's twofold. It's, yes, he loves the Jewish people. He chose the Jewish people, not because they were any special. He says, they were the smallest of the tribes, but he chose to love them. But then he says he will bring them back, and it's for his namesake, for his glory. It's not for the Jewish people, it's their signs, but it's for God's glory that we're talking about here.
Why do you do what you do?
Very interesting question. I see very much, my heart, all through my life, my heart has been for healing and restoration. And now I see that the return of the Jewish people is for their healing and for their restoration. And it's a rescue. It's a rescue for all of us. I do what I do because I see, now I see people being attacked. We have people coming to our houses that have been beaten up 5 times, 7 times. One 70-year-old lady who had her jaw broken, a Jewish person beaten up because she was Jewish. And so I will do what I can to provide a safe place for these people as they return, and I will do my best to help them plant in the land. I really believe it's God's heart to do it, and I will do what God does.
What is your prayer for Jews around the world today?
That they will wake up and see what is happening, and that they will be ready and prepare for the return of the Jewish people. I understand that there are other emotional issues running, but my heart for the Jewish people is that they will be safe amidst all that is happening and the changes in the world, and that they will find sanctuary, really, in the land of Israel.
Well, Jeremy, thank you very much for sharing today.
My pleasure.